Imagine this. You are fast asleep, and it is exactly 3:30 in the morning.
Just the absolute dead of night.
Right. The house around you is completely dead silent. And suddenly you wake up.
Oh, man.
And you're not just startled, you are entirely disoriented. Your heart is just pounding against your ribs like a war drum.
Yeah, full panic mode.
Exactly.
Mm.
You are covered in a cold sweat. Your breathing is really shallow. And the reason you're awake, the thing that actually just shattered your sleep, is a sound.
What kind of sound?
A loud, sharp, physical thud.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And as the fog of sleep sort of starts to clear from your brain, you realize with this just dawning, visceral sense of horror that the sound was your own fist.
Wait, really?
Yes, you had physically slammed your hand into the wall next to your bed. You literally tried to punch your way out of a nightmare, and the momentum, it just carried over into the waking world.
That imagery is incredibly intense. I mean, it immediately breaks down the wall we usually build between our sleeping lives and our waking reality.
It really does. It's terrifying.
It is, because when the physical force of a dream shatters that barrier and bleeds into your bedroom, it tells you that whatever was happening in that, subconscious landscape, it wasn't just a passing anxiety.
All right. It wasn't just a bad dream about forgetting your homework.
Exactly. It wasn't your brain just sorting through the day's trivial stress. It was a simulated fight for survival. And it was so convincing that your central nervous system actually bypassed its own safety protocols just to physically defend your body.
And while understanding that overwhelming physical panic is our mission today, because for this deep dive, we are examining a highly detailed, deeply introspective personal account of a terrifying nightmare.
It's a fascinating source text.
It really is. So the author of our source text dreamt they were being hunted by the founder of a massive religious cult.
Which is already a heavy premise.
Super heavy.
Yeah.
But the author, they don't just treat this as a spooky campfire story or, a bad night's sleep to just be forgotten by breakfast.
Right, they dig into it.
They treat it as a literal distress signal from their own psyche. They meticulously decode the symbols, the cult, the bizarre environment, the shifting faces of the people they love, just to understand what their subconscious is trying to force them to see.
And it serves as a remarkable piece of self-analysis that we can all learn from. I mean, the text uses this exaggerated, terrifying dream to explore human distrust, the deep-seated fear of being controlled, and ultimately the startling realization of one's own inner strength.
Yeah, because we often just dismiss our nightmares, right?
We do, constantly. But they're constructed from the raw materials of our waking anxieties.
So we're going to decode that hidden architecture today. Our goal is to explore what a colossal, almost cinematic nightmare about a cult can reveal about the subtle, everyday pressures you face in your own life.
The stuff we usually ignore.
Exactly. We are talking about the inability to say no, the fear of being manipulated by people you actually trust, and the incredibly heavy, sometimes crushing burden of protecting the people you love.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. So what does this all mean for you and your own midnight anxieties? Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin with a dream this complex?
Yeah, well, the best place to start is the environment the subconscious built for this dream.
The setting itself.
Right. The setting is never just a backdrop, it is a psychological mirror. The architecture of a dream is literally the physical manifestation of the dreamer's internal state.
So before we even get to the feeling of being hunted, we really have to look at the bizarre world this dream created.
Right, the mountain.
Yes. The cult founder in this nightmare, they don't just have a compound or like a church building. They own an entire mountain.
An entire mountain. That scale is important.
And it's not some barren, spooky wilderness either. The source describes it as being filled with these massive, elaborate facilities.
It's almost resort-like, right?
Yeah, exactly. There are water slides, hot springs, sprawling saunas. It is framed as this place of immense wealth and salvation. It feels almost like a bizarre luxury resort just dropped right into the middle of a cult compound.
The juxtaposition there is brilliant and deeply unsettling. I mean, it speaks to how control is often packaged in our waking lives.
It's packaged as a good thing.
Right. The mountain itself represents scale. It's this overwhelming, insurmountable power that casts a shadow over everything else. But the amenities, the water slides and the hot springs, they represent the lure.
It's a trap.
Exactly. It's the illusion of comfort used to draw people in and keep them docile.
But the author points out this incredibly dark underbelly to all that luxury. Because amidst all these luxurious, almost absurd stage props, there are these vulnerable, troubled female followers.
And they're totally exposed.
Yes, the text describes them walking around naked, being subjected to uncomfortable, invasive stares from others. The contrast is deeply creepy.
It's highly disturbing.
Like, here is a water slide, which is this symbol of childhood joy and leisure, but simultaneously you have zero bodily autonomy, and you are constantly being watched and judged.
And what's fascinating here is the paradox of the water slides and saunas. It's leisure and relaxation weaponized as tools of entrapment.
Wow.
When a dominating dictator-like figure appears in our dreams, especially one with this immense scale of resources, we really have to look past the literal interpretation.
Meaning they aren't actually afraid of a real-life cult leader.
Right, exactly. It rarely means the dreamer is actually afraid of a literal political dictator or a literal cult. What it reflects is how small daily waking pressures compound over time.
Oh, that makes so much sense. When you say daily pressures compounding, my mind immediately goes to modern social and professional dynamics.
Sure. Yeah.
Like the pressure to be a team player at a toxic job, even when it totally violates your personal boundaries. Or dealing with a passive-aggressive manager where you constantly have to read the room. Are those the kinds of micro-submissions the dream is feeding on?
Those are the exact mechanisms at play. Think about the energy it takes to constantly swallow your own boundaries.
It's exhausting.
It is. Saying yes to a project when you are already burned out, smiling through an uncomfortable interaction, suppressing a no just to keep the peace in your household.
Right.
Every single time you do that in your waking life, you are essentially handing over a tiny fraction of your autonomy. And your subconscious is keeping a meticulous ledger.
It's keeping track of every single time you fold.
Yes. It gathers up all those small, ignored moments of submission, and it builds a mountain. So the sheer scale of the dream environment, a mountain owned by one single entity, is a direct correlation to how powerless the dreamer feels in their day-to-day reality.
That's almost like technical debt in software development.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Yeah, every time you swallow a boundary or say yes when you mean no, you are writing bad code in your psyche. You can ignore it for a while, you can put a patch on it, but eventually the system crashes.
Exactly.
And your subconscious renders that massive systemic failure as a mountain-owning cult leader. So is the sheer size of the cult an indicator of just how powerless the dreamer feels?
Absolutely. That is a perfect analogy. The mind uses the concept of scale to communicate urgency because the waking mind is just so good at minimizing that bad code.
We just brush it off.
We do. If the dream had just conjured a mean boss in a cubicle, the dreamer might wake up and say, "Oh, I just need a vacation. A cubicle is manageable, you can quit a job."
Right. You can walk out of a cubicle.
But a mountain owned by an all-powerful figure who controls the water you bathe in and the paths you walk on, that signifies a pervasive, inescapable feeling of being fundamentally controlled.
It's terrifying.
The dreamer isn't just dealing with a difficult person, they are dealing with a systemic surrender of their own will. And those uncomfortable stares at the naked followers, that represents the vulnerability and exposure you feel when your boundaries are constantly being violated, even in environments that claim to be safe or healing.
The idea that the safe space is actually the trap, that brings us to the next psychological layer of this nightmare. The sense of entrapment isn't just physical.
Yeah, it goes deeper.
It's not just about being stuck on a mountain with weird saunas and no clothes. The entrapment moves from the environment directly into the mind itself. And this leads to what the source text identifies as the dream's most deeply disturbing element.
The mechanics of brainwashing.
Yes, the mechanics of brainwashing. The source notes a very specific atmospheric shift here. The entire climate of the dream grew incredibly tense just by the introduction of the concept of brainwashing.
Right. It wasn't even an action that the dreamer witnessed at first. Just the word, the looming idea of it, literally changed the air pressure of the dream.
And the way the cult leader operates to achieve this brainwashing is just sickening. The author describes the leader performing these public miracle healings.
But there's a catch, right?
A horrifying catch. The leader intentionally hurts people or makes them sick first, purely so they can use their supposed superpowers to pretend to cure them later.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. They are creating the disease just to sell the cure, but they're doing it with people's actual lives and bodies.
It is the ultimate, most insidious form of manipulation. You destabilize someone, you break down their physical or mental health, you make them doubt their own reality, and then you swoop in as their only savior.
The author specifically notes the physical toll of this sequence, too. Watching this fake, abusive healing caused their chest to tighten within the dream, and it created an intense physical tension that actually lingered long into the waking hours.
Their body actually remembered the stress.
Exactly. Their body reacted as if it had endured a physical assault.
Because to the psyche, it is an assault. It is an attack on the fundamental integrity of the self. If we dive into the root of this terror, it becomes clear that this goes far beyond a fear of cults.
Because, cults are pretty rare for most people.
Right. Cults, in the grand scheme of things, are relatively rare. What this scenario represents is the universal fear of having your own thoughts, feelings, and worldview conveniently overwritten by someone else.
The fear of being erased.
Exactly. It is the terror of losing your internal compass.
Which is arguably way scarier than a traditional nightmare monster with fangs.
Oh, without a doubt.
A monster just wants to end your life. Someone who wants to overwrite your mind, wants to erase you entirely and replace you with a puppet that serves their needs. You survive, but you are no longer yourself.
And that fear lurks in incredibly mundane places.
Like where?
Well, it lurks in toxic household dynamics where a parent constantly invalidates a child's feelings, telling them they aren't actually sad or they aren't actually hurt.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It exists in relationships where a partner uses gaslighting to make you feel crazy for noticing their bad behavior. It happens in workplaces where a boss constantly moves the goalposts and then questions your competence when you fail to score.
That is so common.
It really is. When your reality is constantly questioned by an authority figure, you start to fear that your mind is no longer your own. You start to rely on their version of reality. That cognitive overwrite is the brainwashing the dream is warning the author about.
So the dream is throwing up a massive red flag, basically screaming, you are letting someone else write your code right now, and it's destroying your operating system.
Perfectly said.
But the author managed to extract a surprisingly positive psychological insight from this sheer terror, didn't they?
They did, and it highlights a crucial paradigm shift in how we interpret our anxiety.
Let's hear it.
The author realizes that the very fact they felt such intense, paralyzing fear at the idea of brainwashing is actually a very positive indicator of their mental health.
Wait, really? Here's where it gets really interesting. The fear itself is proof of your own internal resistance.
Precisely. Think about the mechanics of actual brainwashing. If it had already worked, if the dreamer had truly lost their autonomy, they wouldn't be afraid.
Oh, because they'd just be on board with it.
Exactly. They would be docile. They would be one of the followers walking around the hot springs perfectly content with their subjugation.
Wow. Right.
The fact that their chest was tightening, that they felt physical revulsion and terror at the fake healings, proves there is a strong, intact core inside them. There is a deeply rooted sense of self that is fiercely fighting against being swept away.
So the panic is a good thing.
Yes. The fear is the alarm bell of a healthy psychological immune system trying to fight off a cognitive infection.
Leaning into that fear and recognizing it as your own boundary, asserting itself, totally flips the script on how we handle nightmares. It frames the terror not as a weakness, but as your core screaming, I am still here and I will not be erased.
It's empowering in a dark way.
It really is. But as the narrative of the dream progresses, this fear of manipulation by strangers, by this big, bad, abstract cult leader, takes a much more intimate and therefore much darker turn.
It gets personal.
It gets so personal. The manipulation starts to infect the people closest to the dreamer.
The dream shifts its focus from systemic environmental anxiety to the deep, agonizing pain of personal betrayal.
Yeah, and this part is rough. In the next sequence, the author is walking on a mountain path with their father.
Okay.
And initially, the father is exactly who you would expect in waking life, a quiet, reliable, grounding presence. He's chopping wood. It seems almost peaceful, like a momentary respite from all the cult imagery.
A safe space.
Exactly. But then the physical action shifts. Instead of carefully using the axe to split the wood, the father begins violently smashing the wood against the stand.
A total change in demeanor.
Yeah. The author notes that the father is suddenly radiating this suppressed, aggressive, angry energy.
The shift in kinetic energy is vital to decode here. The subconscious is an absolute master at picking up on microexpressions and unsaid tensions that our conscious minds just filter out to keep the peace.
So we see things we don't realize we see.
All the time. Smashing the wood instead of methodically chopping it is a manifestation of latent aggression. The dream is forcing the dreamer to pay attention, warning them that the person they categorize as safe is actually harboring something volatile and dangerous beneath the surface.
And then the dream delivers what I found to be the most unsettling moment in the entire text.
The face change.
The face change. As the dreamer is watching this violent display, their father's face slowly begins to morph.
Hmm.
It changes incrementally from the familiar, trusted face of their dad into the face of an unknown spiritual guru.
The morphing face is a classic symbol in dream psychology, but it is rarely executed with such narrative precision. It represents the slow buildup of distrust in a close relationship.
But I'm curious, why this slow morph? Why does the brain expend the energy to animate a slow transition? If the father is a threat, why not just have the guru suddenly appear from behind a tree or have the father pull off a mask like a villain? Why stretch it out?
Because the visual pacing of the dream reflects the emotional pacing of the betrayal.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
The most painful betrayals come from those we desperately do not want to doubt. If a stranger betrays you, you can immediately categorize them as a threat and move on.
Right, you just cut them off.
Exactly. But if a family member, a parent, or a long-term partner betrays you, it threatens your fundamental sense of safety in the world. So, in waking life, when a loved one does something slightly toxic or crosses a boundary, we tend to swallow the discomfort.
We rationalize it.
Yes. We actively make excuses for them. We tell ourselves, oh, they just had a long day at work, or they didn't mean it the way it sounded. We actively suppress our growing distrust because confronting it would require us to reevaluate the entire foundation of the relationship.
Which is too hard to do on a Tuesday.
Way too hard.
Hmm.
So the morphing face is the visual representation of the dreamer desperately trying to hold on to the image of the good father, while the reality of the dangerous guru slowly overwrites it.
It's that terrible feeling when someone you love says something so out of character. It's like a mask slips.
You know that feeling.
I do. You want to trust them, you want to unsee it, but the new data point is there. You feel that pit in your stomach, but you just force a smile anyway to keep the dinner party going. You just can't trust them anymore.
And that forced smile is exactly what the subconscious weaponizes against you later.
Because you ignored it.
Right, because you suppressed the instinct to defend yourself or question the behavior in the daylight, the brain is forced to process that unresolved vulnerability in the dark.
Man, the brain is relentless.
It really is. Because it involves family, the emotional stakes are just too high to ignore. So the subconscious forces the issue at night by literally taking the face of the loved one and corrupting it. It strips away your waking excuses.
Yeah.
It is forcing the dreamer to look at the reality they are avoiding. The person who is supposed to be your protector has become part of the threat. The quiet, reliable father has become the volatile, dangerous guru.
And as this father figure becomes a source of danger, the dream continues to aggressively pull in other real-world family dynamics to raise the stakes even higher.
It pulls from real life again.
It does. The bleed-through of waking reality into the dream space becomes incredibly intense here.
The subconscious does not operate in a vacuum. It is incredibly efficient at harvesting our actual waking anxieties, our real-world grief, and our daily worries, and weaving them straight into the narrative of the nightmare.
The source mentions two very specific real-world integrations that occur back-to-back.
Let's hear them.
First, a staff member of the cult casually mentions to the dreamer that their brother is sick in the next room, and the author clarifies in the text that this is based on a real-life event. They actually have a sick brother whom they worry about constantly.
That's heartbreaking.
It really is. And second, the dreamer hears a voice calling out from the distance saying, "Not yet." The author realizes the voice sounds exactly like their mother, and hearing that specific phrase delivered in that specific cadence triggers a severe re-experiencing of deep physical chest pain right there in the dream.
This sequence is a masterclass in how compartmentalization fails us.
What do you mean by that?
Well, during the day, the dreamer is likely carrying a massive, heavy burden of worry for their sick brother and perhaps unresolved tension with their mother. But during the day, you have to function.
Right, you have a job, you have errands.
Exactly. You have to go to work, you have to pay bills, you have to answer emails. So you compartmentalize that worry. You put it in a box on a mental shelf so you can survive the day.
We all do that.
But during REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for logic, executive function, and maintaining those mental compartments, it goes largely offline.
The guard is down.
The guard is down. The emotional centers, particularly the amygdala, become highly active. The compartments burst open.
But I struggle with the evolutionary logic here, though. Let's look at the biology of sleep. If REM sleep is biologically designed for physical rest, memory consolidation, and neurological recovery, why would the brain expend massive amounts of energy to simulate our worst fears?
It seems counterintuitive.
It really does. Torturing us with the image of a sick sibling while we are helpless to save them seems like a terrible design flaw for a biological system meant to heal and restore us. Why not just let the dreamer rest?
It feels like a design flaw, but it is actually a vital feature of emotional processing. The brain prioritizes psychological integration over temporary comfort.
Okay, unpack that for me.
In waking life, we use heavy defense mechanisms, denial, distraction, humor, compartmentalization, to avoid feeling the full weight of our pain and terror. But unexpressed, unintegrated emotion is a physiological burden. It creates chronic stress. During sleep, when the logical filters are removed, the brain attempts to process, categorize, and discharge the emotional energy you refuse to deal with during the day.
So it's forcing you to deal with it.
Exactly. It takes the latent anxiety about the brother and puts it right in the center of the cult compound. It merges the real-world vulnerability of the brother with the victims of the cult's fake healing. It is forcing the dreamer to feel the full spectrum of their powerlessness so that the emotional pressure valve can finally release.
Wow.
It hurts, it is terrifying, but it is a necessary function to prevent the psyche from fracturing under the weight of suppressed stress.
That makes sense. As brutal as the execution is, it's essentially emotional triage. The brain is forcing you to clean the wound so it doesn't fester, even if pouring the antiseptic burn.
That's a great way to put it.
It really highlights the incredibly heavy burden of protection. If you are the person who feels responsible for your family, seeing them vulnerable in a dream where you are also actively being hunted is the ultimate manifestation of powerlessness.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, to the listener's own lives, think about the people you dedicate your energy to protecting. It could be a child, an aging parent, or a friend navigating a crisis.
Yeah, anyone you care deeply about.
Right. The stronger your desire to protect them, the greater your underlying fear of your own limitations. The dream is harvesting that exact fear. The terrifying realization that despite your best efforts, you cannot control the world, you cannot cure the illness, and you cannot guarantee their safety.
So caught between this corrupted father figure morphing into a guru, a vulnerable sick brother suffering in the next room, and an all-powerful cult leader pulling the strings of the entire mountain, the dreamer becomes completely paralyzed.
Gridlocked.
Yes, and the dream environment shifts again to reflect this internal gridlock perfectly.
The dreamer enters a phase of the dream that perfectly encapsulates the feeling of being trapped. They find themselves on a dark mountain path.
The imagery the author uses here is just so stark and isolating. The dreamer is walking up a pitch-black mountain path. They only have a small, weak flashlight to see the ground immediately in front of them.
Just enough light for the next step.
Right. And the source notes a profound internal realization at this moment. The dreamer knows they are in danger. They know the cult is evil and that they should turn around and flee down the mountain.
But they don't.
They don't, because they realize that if they go down the mountain alone in the pitch dark, they have absolutely no idea where to go. The darkness outside the flashlight's beam is total.
The unknown.
So they choose to stay in a highly dangerous place because the alternative, complete darkness, isolation, and the utter unknown, feels even more terrifying.
It is a stunning visual metaphor for the mechanics of cognitive dissonance and the paralysis of choice in our waking lives.
Explain the cognitive dissonance part.
Well, cognitive dissonance is the psychological friction that occurs when you hold two conflicting beliefs or when your behavior contradicts your beliefs.
Knowing it's a cult, but staying anyway.
Exactly. The brain hates this friction and will do almost anything to resolve it or avoid acting on it.
The text provides two highly specific, almost mundane scenes within this terrifying environment that perfectly illustrate that friction. First, despite knowing full well that they are in a dangerous cult, the dreamer is tasked with pouring tea into 4 cups for some of the troubled followers.
Playing the role.
Playing the role. And they do it. They stand there, terrified, still playing along, performing these polite, subservient actions.
It's wild to think about.
And second, as they are walking on the path, they spot a white truck with its engine idling. The dreamer points it out to the father, saying, "Hey, someone must be there." They are pointing out a clear anomaly, a potential clue, maybe even a vehicle they could use to escape.
An exit route.
But the father coldly brushes it off and invalidates the observation. And the dreamer just accepts the invalidation and keeps walking.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this mountain path is the perfect representation of cognitive dissonance. You know it's wrong, but you pour the tea anyway.
Because it's easier in the moment.
The act of pouring the tea is the most devastating detail in the entire account. You know the situation is fundamentally corrupt, you feel the danger vibrating in your chest, but you pour the tea anyway. Why? Because going along with the established routine, even a toxic one, requires less immediate psychological risk than flipping the table and running into the dark.
Man, how many of us pour the tea every single day?
Countless people. This is the exact mechanism that keeps people in bad jobs where they are chronically mistreated. It is why people stay in toxic relationships where they are slowly losing their sense of self.
They just keep pouring the tea.
They stay because they don't see a clear exit route. They don't have a map down the mountain. The fear of the unknown, of financial ruin, of being unloved, of complete isolation, it completely overrides the immediate misery of the known.
So they just swallow their doubts.
They do. They see the white truck, which represents a red flag or a potential exit route, but when the authority figure tells them to ignore it, they let it go. Preserving the current relationship with the father, even though his face is morphing and his energy is violent, feels safer than confronting the void of the dark mountain alone.
It is the ultimate paralysis. When every available choice feels like a losing move, you default to freezing. You keep pouring the tea. You keep nodding at the boss. You force the smile at dinner.
You just compress everything.
You let the internal tension build and build. But, I mean, the human psyche is not designed to sustain infinite compression. You can only compress a spring so much before the kinetic energy violently snaps back. And in the dream narrative, the paralysis finally shatters, leading to a shocking, intensely primal reaction.
The socially conditioned facade of civility completely drops away.
The source describes the breaking point so vividly. The dreamer is suddenly faced with an unspeakable, life-threatening terror that goes completely beyond words.
Language just fails.
The text emphasizes that language fails entirely. In that moment of absolute extremity, the dreamer's polite, tea-pouring persona just disintegrates. They don't try to reason with the threat. They don't attempt to negotiate or apologize.
They go primal.
The dreamer reacts purely on instinct. They literally bare their teeth like a cornered wild dog. They begin growling from the back of their throat to intimidate the approaching threat, and they raise a fist, fully prepared to physically batter the attacker.
From a psychological and neurobiological standpoint, this is the most triumphant moment in the narrative.
It's incredible to read. It is like discovering a massive hidden generator in the basement of your house right when the entire city's power grid fails.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it.
You think you're just this polite, accommodating person who always says yes, who pours the tea, who carefully reads the room to avoid conflict. But underneath all of those decades of social conditioning, there was a wild, unbothered animal willing to engage in absolute violence to ensure your survival. And the fascinating thing is, reading the text, the author isn't horrified by this animalistic display. They are actually proud of this instinct.
And they have every right to be proud. This sequence highlights a profound, often overlooked truth about human nature.
You jizz.
No matter how polite, how subdued, or how passive we are forced to be during our waking hours by the demands of society, corporate culture, or family expectations, our primal self-preservation instinct remains entirely intact.
It's still in there.
It cannot be trained out of us. When a threat bypasses our logical filters and strikes directly at the core of our survival, the limbic system, the primitive emotional center of the brain, seizes total control.
The animal takes over.
The body reacts with defensive posturing before the conscious, civilized mind can even process what is happening.
Baring teeth is such a specifically animalistic detail, too. It forces us to remember that beneath the suits and the polite emails, we are mammals.
We constantly forget that. We wrap ourselves in complex language, advanced technology, and intricate social norms. But when the psychological or physical life is pushed to the absolute brink, those layers burn away.
It's purely biological.
Exactly. Baring teeth is a universal mammalian sign of defense. It communicates a very simple, very dangerous message. I am terrified, but I am armed with biological weapons, and I will inflict severe damage if you take one more step.
Wow.
The fact that the dreamer was able to access this primal state means they haven't been broken by the cult leader or the mountain. The waking life pressures haven't won. The fierce, unyielding core of the self is still alive, awake, and ready to draw blood if necessary to protect its existence.
It is a deeply empowering realization to know that even if you feel weak, compromised, or exhausted in your daily life, that primal guard dog is still awake in the basement, ready to defend the house.
Always on duty.
And in the context of the dream, this incredible surge of primal, aggressive energy, this literal baring of the teeth, acts as a catalyst. It triggers a crucial structural shift in the dream itself. It creates a sudden shift in consciousness.
The sheer, unadulterated force of the survival instinct shocks the conscious mind awake within the simulation of the dream. It induces lucidity.
The dreamer suddenly realizes, wait, this is an illusion. I am dreaming. But the narrative takes another terrifying turn here.
Because it doesn't end there.
Right, realizing as a dream isn't enough to banish the threat. The cult leader doesn't just dissolve into smoke. The mountain doesn't disappear. A desperate, violent struggle ensues to actually force the brain to wake up.
The dream shifts from a narrative simulation into a literal neurobiological battle of wills.
The source describes the dreamer frantically hitting their own dream body, waving their arms wildly, and physically fighting to ward off the approaching enemy. And because the panic is so absolute, all of this frantic movement inside the dream translates directly into the physical world.
The bleed-through we talked about.
That is how we arrive at the opening hook of our deep dive. The struggle to escape the dream is so intense that the dreamer physically punches the wall next to their bed in reality, using the pain of the impact to finally shatter the dream state.
This specific event provides a fascinating window into the complex mind-body connection during REM sleep.
Tell us about the neurology here.
To understand why this is so significant, we have to look at the neurology of dreaming. Normally, when you enter REM sleep, which is when the most vivid dreaming occurs, your brainstem releases neurotransmitters, specifically GABA and glycine, to paralyze your major motor neurons.
Okay.
This mechanism is called rematonia. It is a biological safety feature designed to prevent you from getting out of bed and acting out your dreams, which could lead to severe injury.
So under normal circumstances, your brain essentially locks your body down so you can safely hallucinate.
Exactly. But when a nightmare reaches this extreme level of life or death panic, the signals from the amygdala can become so overwhelmingly powerful that they override the chemical paralysis of the brainstem.
The fear just busts right through the paralysis.
The physical action required for survival breaks through the neurological barrier.
It emphasizes just how real the stakes feel to the brain. The brain's threat detection system doesn't know it's a dream. It believes the body is about to be destroyed.
And a nightmare of this magnitude, one constructed from such deeply rooted waking anxieties about autonomy, control, and betrayal, it possesses immense structural integrity. It has momentum.
Doesn't want to let go.
It doesn't just politely let you go the moment you realize you're dreaming. The neural pathways firing this fear are fully engaged and flooding the system with adrenaline. It takes an immense Herculean effort of conscious willpower to claw your way back up to reality against that current.
The author literally had to engage in hand-to-hand combat with their own mind to escape.
But the ultimate takeaway from that struggle is absolute victory.
A hard-won victory.
Extremely hard one. It might feel horrific to wake up in a cold sweat with a bruised hand, but it is actually a profound triumph of the self. The dreamer's conscious will to not be swallowed by the fear, to refuse submission to the cult leader, won the battle. They forced themselves awake.
They broke out.
They chose the harsh reality of waking up over the comfortable, subservient illusion of remaining on the mountain.
But the psychological battle doesn't end the second you open your eyes and realize you were in your bedroom.
Yeah.
You've fought the monster, you've broken the paralysis, you've hit the wall, and now you are awake. But the psychological work of processing what just happened is really just beginning. We are entering the aftermath.
Right. We have to look at how the author navigates the treacherous shoreline between the nightmare and the morning.
The text sets the scene. It is 3:30 a.m. The house is completely quiet. The adrenaline is still pumping.
The worst time to be awake.
The absolute worst. The author notes that they make an active, conscious choice not to try to go back to sleep. They are terrified that if they close their eyes, the gravitational pull of the dream will just drag them right back into the cult compound like an undertow.
That's a very real fear.
Instead, they force themselves out of bed, they turn on all the lights, they go to the kitchen to make a hot drink, and they start tidying their room. They choose to let their physical tension melt away at their own pace, rather than forcing themselves back into vulnerability.
This is an incredibly important intuitive step.
Why is that?
Often people try to force themselves back to sleep immediately after a severe nightmare because they look at the clock and think, I need to get my 8 hours, I have to work tomorrow.
Guilty. I do that all the time.
We all do. But returning to sleep while your central nervous system is still flooded with cortisol and locked in a high-alert fight-or-flight mode is a recipe for disaster. The brain hasn't downregulated, so it will simply drop you right back into the exact same nightmare loop.
You have to physically break the circuit.
Exactly. The author is intuitively executing the exact grounding techniques that trauma specialists recommend for PTSD flashbacks or severe panic attacks.
Like turning on the lights.
Turning on the overhead lights forces the pupils to constrict and reorients the brain to the present, safe, physical reality. Making a hot drink provides soothing, grounding sensory input. The warmth of the mug, the smell of the tea.
And tidying up?
Tidying the room is a low-stakes task that creates a sense of immediate order and control in the physical environment, which directly counters the total lack of control they just experienced on the mountain.
That makes a ton of sense. But even with the lights on and the hot tea in hand, there is a lingering shadow over the author's mind. As they're sitting there at 3:30 in the morning, they document a really profound, chilling realization.
The misanthropy.
Yes. They state that human beings are infinitely scarier than ghosts or monsters. The nightmare leaves behind this foul, heavy aftertaste of misanthropy.
Misanthropy being a general hatred, deep distrust, or profound contempt for the human species and human nature.
Right. It's this creeping, insidious feeling that absolutely no one in the real world can be trusted.
Not after what the brain just showed them.
Exactly. The morphing face of the father, the fake healings by the leader, the silent complicity of the followers, it all bleeds out of the dream and stains their waking perception. If the people constructed by your own mind can betray you that deeply, how can you possibly look at your coworkers, your friends, or your family the same way when the sun comes up?
It is a devastating psychological hangover. When your subconscious spends hours running an immersive, high-stakes simulation designed to convince you that human connection is a trap, you don't just shake that off with a cup of tea. The paranoia lingers in the nervous system.
So how do you function the next day? I mean, if you wake up feeling like everyone is a potential cult leader or a morphing face, how do you go to the grocery store or attend a staff meeting?
This raises an important question. How do we bridge the gap between a nightmare and the morning? The source material provides a remarkably mature, pragmatic psychological toolkit for navigating this exact state.
What's the first step?
First and foremost, when you wake up feeling that intense misanthropy, the author emphasizes that you should not force the feeling away.
Don't fight it.
Don't immediately try to logic yourself out of it by saying, oh, my friends are great, my dad is a good guy, I'm being silly. That is just more toxic positivity and emotional suppression, which is exactly what built the mountain in the first place. You have to accept the feeling.
You have to let the paranoia be in the room with you without fighting it.
Yes. Validate the nervous system's response. Acknowledge that your brain just ran a terrifying, exhausting simulation of ultimate betrayal, and it is entirely biologically natural to feel wary and guarded.
But you can't stay there, right?
No, however, we cannot stay in that misanthropic state forever because isolation breeds further psychological decay. The crucial step, according to the text, is the deliberate, conscious separation of the betrayal felt in the dream from your actual waking relationships.
But practically speaking, how do you bridge that gap? How do you tell your brain that the father in the kitchen isn't the guru from the mountain?
You rely on what the author did. The slow integration of morning sunlight and tiny, highly predictable routines.
Routine is key.
Exposure to morning light physically helps reset the circadian rhythm, signaling to the brainstem that the night and the danger associated with it is definitively over. And those small routines, making coffee, watering a plant, walking the dog, maybe just waving to a neighbor, these actions are incredibly important.
Because they're safe?
They are predictable, they treat you kindly, they are the exact opposite of the chaotic, manipulative environment of the dream. By intentionally engaging in these small, safe, low-stakes interactions with reality, you slowly rebuild the boundary between the dream's paranoia and the waking world's truth. You are continuously proving to your nervous system, step by step, that you are currently safe.
It's like you have to carefully, gently introduce yourself back to humanity.
Yeah.
You don't jump straight into a crowded party or a deep emotional conversation. You just say good morning to the mailman first.
Right.
And let your brain log that safe interaction.
Rebuilding trust one tiny interaction at a time.
Exactly. Let's pull all of these threads together. Because we have been on an incredibly deep, complex journey today into the hidden architecture of a genuinely terrifying nightmare.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We started our exploration at the base of a mountain of false salvation, where luxurious water slides masked a system of absolute control and lost autonomy. We watched as a trusted father's face slowly morphed into a dangerous stranger, representing the agonizing realization of betrayal and the danger of suppressing our doubts.
We examined the neuroscience behind the terror, Seeing how our waking anxieties, the heavy burden of protecting a sick sibling, the fear of losing our internal compass to toxic environments are harvested by the amygdala and magnified 1,000 times over in the dark.
And most importantly, we witnessed the incredible, empowering breaking point. We saw the moment the polite tea-pouring facade completely crumbled and the dreamer bared their teeth like a cornered wild animal.
Like a primal instinct.
It proved that our primal, fierce instincts for self-preservation cannot be extinguished. It is always there, waiting in the dark to protect us when logic fails. It all culminated in that desperate physical fight to override the brain's paralysis and wake up, ending with the quiet, lonely peace of a hot drink at 3:30 in the morning.
It serves as a powerful reminder that terrible nightmares, while physically exhausting and emotionally haunting, are rarely just meaningless noise. They are often our own minds trying desperately to show us a fierce, unyielding core of strength that we rarely get to see or allow ourselves to use in our polite, waking lives.
The nightmare is the mirror that refuses to lie, which leaves me with a final, slightly provocative thought for you to take with you today.
I'm ready.
Next time you're sitting in a boring, seemingly endless meeting, or you find yourself smiling politely at someone who is subtly trying to manipulate or diminish you, take a moment to really look around the room.
At the other people.
Yes. Everyone sitting at that table is wearing a carefully constructed mask of civility. They are all, in their own way, pouring the tea to survive the day. But deep down, in the hidden landscape of their dreams, every single one of them possesses the capacity to drop the facade, bare their teeth, and fight violently for their autonomy.
They all have that generator in the basement.
They all do. It makes you wonder, is our polite, subdued waking life the real illusion we all agree to maintain? And the brutal animal honesty of the nightmare, the actual truth of who we really are?
That is a thought to keep you up at night.
Think about that tonight when you turn off the lights. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Stay curious, stay fierce, and we will catch you next time.